The bus hissed to a stop, its tired gears grinding in the still morning air. Eleanor Vance stepped out onto Main Street, the worn leather duffel bag slung over her shoulder like a second skin. It had been years since she last stood on this patch of cracked asphalt. The town of Harmony, Indiana, looked just as she remembered it, a sleepy collection of brick buildings with faded paint, a single traffic light, and a flagpole in the square where the American flag hung limp in the humid summer air. Ellie, as her friends had called her since childhood, was no longer a girl. The war had changed her, not in a way you could see on the surface, but in the quiet strength that settled behind her eyes. At 24, she carried the poise of a woman twice her age. Her hair, cut short and neat, was tucked under a simple cap. Her posture was straight, her shoulders squared, a habit picked up from years in uniform. The duffel felt light, though it held all her worldly possessions. Everything that mattered most was stored not in the bag, but in her memory. She walked past Miller's General Store, the bell on the door jingling a familiar tune. She saw faces she knew, but they looked through her, not at her. They saw a woman home from some vague service, but they didn't see a soldier. They didn't see the dirt and blood and sweat of the Pacific Islands. They didn't see the fear that had chilled her bones or the courage that had warmed them. Her first stop was the VFW Hall, a squat building with a faded sign. This was where the men gathered. This was where the stories were told. This was where the respect was earned, or so she had been told. She pushed open the heavy oak door and the sound of laughter and clinking glasses stopped. Every eye in the room turned to her. She felt their judgment, a silent wave of it that hit her hard. A large, loud man named Frank leaned over the bar. Frank had been a corporal in the Army, serving mostly in the supply lines, but he wore his VFW cap like a Medal of Honor. He had a round face and a booming laugh that could fill a room, but today his eyes were small and mean. He looked at her, his lips twisting into a smirk. "Well, well, look what the cat dragged in," Frank said, his voice laced with mocking humor. "Little Ellie Vance, back from her little trip." The laughter returned, a low rumble that made Ellie's stomach churn. She walked to the bar, her steps firm and even. She didn't flinch. "Hello, Frank," she said, her voice clear and calm. "I'm glad to see you're keeping the place running." "Running just fine without any women," he sneered. "Some things are just meant for men, Ellie, like this place. Like the war." A cold anger began to simmer inside her. She didn't say anything. She had seen real anger. This was just a small, ugly echo of it. Frank took a sip of his beer and gestured to a large frame on the wall, filled with photos of men in uniform. "We've got heroes in those pictures, Ellie. Men who stood their ground. We don't have any women in there. And we don't have any women who came back carrying a .45 neither." He said it like he knew. He said it like he was trying to pick a fight. He had heard the stories, the whispered tales of her time overseas, but he didn't believe them. He couldn't. It didn't fit his simple world, a world where men fought and women waited. "I was there, Frank," Ellie said quietly. "I served. I did what was asked of me." He laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "You served coffee, maybe? Or worked a typewriter? Don't tell me you saw anything real, Ellie. You wouldn't last 5 minutes on the front lines. A woman's not built for that." The words were a direct hit. They weren't just insulting her. They were erasing her sacrifice. They were making her courage into a joke. The other men in the room looked away, uncomfortable, but none of them spoke up. They didn't have the guts. Ellie had a reason for coming to the VFW hall first. She wasn't looking for a drink or a pat on the back. She was looking for a job. She wanted to join the local sheriff's department. She had sent letters, made calls, but they all said the same thing: no women on the force. She figured Frank might be able to help her get a foot in the door. He had connections. He had power in this small town. "I came here to ask you something, Frank," she said, her eyes locked on his. He leaned in, a cruel glint in his eyes. "Spit it out, little lady." "I want to be a deputy," she said. "I want to serve this town. I have the training, the skills. I know what I'm doing." Frank's laughter was louder this time. It filled the room, bouncing off the framed pictures and the dusty trophies. It felt like a slap. "You a deputy? What are you gonna do, polish the patrol cars? Hand out tickets for jaywalking? He mocked. The only thing you'll be carrying is a clipboard, Ellie. You're not cut out for this. You're not cut out for the real world. Ellie stood there, her body tense, but her face a mask of calm. He didn't know. He didn't know about the mud and the jungle heat. He didn't know about the sound of incoming fire. He didn't know about the weight of a rifle in her hands, or the feel of a .45 in her palm, its steel cold and solid, a promise of last resort. She could have told him. She could have told him about the day she was separated from her unit, lost in the jungle, with only her wits and her sidearm to keep her alive. She could have told him about the moment a Japanese soldier, a young man no older than herself, came around a bend, his own pistol in his hand. She could have told him about the fear and the split-second decision that saved her life. But she didn't. He wouldn't have believed her. He would have just laughed again. The mockery in the room was a physical weight on her shoulders. She turned and walked out, the laughter following her until the heavy door shut behind her. The bell on Miller's General Store jingled again as she walked by. She didn't see the town as a peaceful place anymore. She saw it as a place full of men who had never seen what she had seen, who had never felt what she had felt. They were living in a world of make-believe, and she was a ghost from a world they couldn't even imagine. As she walked down Main Street, a small, quiet whisper of an idea began to form in her mind. They didn't believe her. They didn't respect her. They thought she was weak. Fine. She would just have to prove them wrong. The journey to justice had just begun, and the first step was to face the pain of being underestimated. The real fight wasn't on a distant island. It was right here in her hometown, and it was for her own dignity. She walked to the bus station, her mind already racing. She didn't know how, but she would show them. She would show Frank. She would show all of them. She would find a way to make them see that her past wasn't a joke, but a foundation of strength. She would make them understand that a .45 wasn't just a man's weapon. It was a soldier's tool, and she had used it to survive. She would make them see. She had to. The memories hit Eleanor Vance like a wave, cold and sudden. The laughter of the men in the VFW hall faded into a distant, muffled echo, replaced by the sharp, metallic tang of jungle air. Her mind, a place she kept locked away, had opened a door she had vowed to keep shut. She was no longer on Main Street, Indiana. She was back in the thick, humid air of a small island in the Pacific. It was a day that had been burned into her mind, a moment of pure terror and raw courage. The sun was a blinding white disk in a sky the color of a faded soldier's blanket. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth, rotting leaves, and the sharp, coppery smell of blood. Ellie had been a combat medic, a part of a small team sent to track a downed pilot. Their mission was simple: find him, patch him up, and get out. But nothing in war was simple. They had been moving for 3 days, the jungle closing in on them like a living thing. The bugs were relentless, the heat a heavy blanket. The enemy was everywhere and nowhere all at once. Her rifle, a trusty Garand, was heavy on her shoulder, but she had a lighter comfort on her hip, the M1911A1 .45 pistol. It was her backup, her last hope. It felt solid, a piece of American steel she could trust with her life. Her team was made up of 4 men. Corporal Miller, a quiet kid from Alabama who talked about nothing but his mama's fried chicken. Sergeant Hayes, a tough-as-nails leader who never smiled. And 2 other soldiers, Private Jones and Private Chen, both young and scared like her. Their silence was broken only by the crack of twigs under their boots and the distant sound of machine gun fire, a constant reminder that they were not alone. They had found the pilot, but it was too late. He was gone. As they turned back, a sniper opened fire. Sergeant Hayes went down first, a clean shot to the chest. The world went still for a second, then exploded into chaos. The team scattered, diving for cover as bullets whizzed past their heads. Ellie saw Miller fall, a silent gasp as he crumpled into the undergrowth. Jones and Chen were nowhere to be seen. She was alone. She scrambled behind a large banyan tree, the trunk as wide as a truck. Her heart was a frantic drum in her chest. She reloaded her rifle, her hands shaking. But then she heard something. A sound she would never forget. The slow, deliberate crack of a twig, just a few feet away. It wasn't a squirrel or a bird. It was a man walking slowly, carefully, coming to finish her. She peeked around the tree. It was a Japanese soldier. He was holding a Type 14 Nambu pistol, a smaller, lighter gun than her .45. She saw his face just for a moment, young, tired, and scared, just like hers. His eyes were focused on the ground, searching for her. He didn't know where she was. He was just looking for a target. Her mind raced. Her rifle was too slow. She needed to be fast. She needed to be ready. She reached for her M1911A1. It was heavy in her hand, a familiar weight that calmed her. It was a solid tool built for a single purpose. It was a simple machine, but it was one she knew. She had practiced with it for hours. She knew how it felt. She knew its power. The Japanese soldier raised his gun. It was a small, delicate pistol. It looked fragile, a toy. His finger was on the trigger. He wasn't a bad man. He was just a man caught in a bad war, just like her. But he was going to kill her. And she had to stop him. She didn't think. She just acted. She raised her .45. The world went silent for a single perfect moment. She squeezed the trigger. The sound was a loud, sharp crack that seemed to shake the very ground beneath her feet. The kickback was hard, but she was ready for it. The Japanese soldier stumbled back, his eyes wide with a mix of surprise and understanding. He looked at the hole in his chest, then at her. He didn't fall. He just stood there for a second, his own small gun falling from his hand. It landed in a puddle of mud with a quiet splash. The man's life drained from his face, and he finally sank to his knees, his body going limp as it slid to the jungle floor. She didn't feel joy. She didn't feel victory. She felt a deep, terrible sadness. She had just killed a man, but she had done it to save her own life. She had done it because she was a soldier. She had done it because her M1911A1 hadn't failed her. It was heavy, yes, and it was hard to use, but it was powerful. It had a kick. It had a purpose. It had stopped him dead in his tracks. His little pistol, she realized later, had fallen short. It was a weak gun. It hadn't done its job. But hers had. She stood there, breathing hard, the smell of cordite and wet earth filling her nose. Her hands were shaking now, not from fear, but from the raw shock of what she had done. She holstered her pistol, her fingers still trembling. She looked at the man she had killed, then at the jungle around her. She was alive. She was alone, but she was alive. She had spent the next 2 days wandering, lost, until a patrol found her. They didn't know what she had been through. They just saw a scared young woman. They didn't see the soldier inside. They didn't see the person who had made a choice that day. They didn't see the person who had put her faith in a piece of American steel and found it true. Back on Main Street, Ellie's eyes were open again, but she was still seeing the jungle. She saw the face of the young Japanese soldier. She saw the look in his eyes. She saw his small gun fall from his hand, a failure. She saw her own gun, her .45, a success. The mockery of Frank and the men in the VFW hall was a pinprick compared to that memory. They thought she was weak. They thought she was a joke. But they had no idea what she had done. They had no idea who she really was. She had not been a hero that day. She had just been a survivor. But she had survived because of her strength, her training, and the .45 she carried, a gun they thought she had no right to even look at. The memory was a shield against their words. It was a quiet truth that lived inside her, a truth she would carry for the rest of her life. She was a soldier. She was a survivor. And she was a woman who knew what it felt like to have a gun in her hand and a life to save. 2 weeks passed. Eleanor Vance found herself in a small apartment on the edge of town, a quiet place that felt like 1,000,000 miles from the jungle and the VFW hall. She had tried to put the past behind her, to find a place for herself in this town that had once been home. She applied for jobs at the local grocery store and the bank, but the answers were always the same. "We're not hiring right now." Or, "We'll keep your resume on file." She knew what it meant. They saw her as a curiosity, not a person with skills. She was a woman who had been to war, and that made them uncomfortable. She found a temporary job at a small diner, scrubbing dishes and mopping floors. The work was hard, but it kept her mind busy. She listened to the small talk of the town, the gossip and the chatter. She heard Frank's name mentioned often. He was seen as a leader, a pillar of the community. He organized the town picnic. He was on the city council. He ran the VFW with an iron fist. He was everything she was not. He was accepted. She was an outsider. One hot afternoon, as she was on her way home from work, she heard the sirens. The loud, mournful sound cut through the lazy afternoon air. A fire truck, a police car, and a few old volunteer vehicles raced past her. She saw the smoke first, a thick black column rising from the other side of town. It was coming from the old grain mill, a building that had stood for 100 years. She ran towards the smoke, her heart pounding in her chest. She wasn't a firefighter. She wasn't a police officer. But she was a person who knew how to act in a crisis. She knew how to stay calm. She knew how to help. When she got there, the scene was chaos. The old mill was a wooden beast burning fiercely. The firefighters were doing their best, but they were a small-town volunteer force, not a trained team. The police were trying to keep people back, but the crowd was growing and getting louder, and then she saw him. Frank. He was standing near the front of the crowd, shouting orders at people. He was wearing his VFW jacket, his face red and sweaty. He was a man who loved to be in charge, but in this moment of real danger, he looked lost. A young man ran up to him, his face pale with fear. "My brother! He's in there! He went back for something and he's not answering his phone." Frank looked at the building, his face a mask of panic. He hesitated. He had no plan. He was just a man with a loud voice and no real courage. Ellie saw the fear in his eyes. She saw the helplessness. She saw the man she had always known he was, all talk, no action. She stepped forward, her voice clear and strong. "Frank, what's the layout of the building?" "Where were they working?" He turned, his eyes wide with surprise. "Ellie, what are you doing here? Get back, this isn't for you." "There's a man inside," she said, ignoring him. "I can help. I know how to navigate in a bad situation. I know how to stay calm." He put a hand on her shoulder, pushing her back. His grip was surprisingly weak. "No, I said no. This is too dangerous. This is for professionals. Go home, Ellie." He said it like a command, but it was just a man's fear speaking. He didn't want her to do anything. He wanted to be the one to do it, to be the hero, but he was too scared. He was paralyzed by his own lack of courage. He wasn't a soldier. He was a loud talker. And in this moment, his true self was showing. The young man who was looking for his brother was crying now, his face a mix of fear and frustration. He looked at Frank, then at Ellie. He didn't know who to trust. Ellie knew what to do. She had been in situations like this before. She had navigated through fire and chaos. She had seen men freeze and men stand tall. She knew which one Frank was. She looked at the building, her mind working fast, building a map of the place she had only seen from the outside. The fire was on the west side. The entrance was on the south. The brother was likely on the north side near the storage area. She could go around the back, find a way in, and get him out. It was a risk, but it was a chance. But Frank was still blocking her way, his fear a physical wall between her and the building. "Get out of here, Ellie. I won't let you go in there. You'll get hurt." He wasn't trying to protect her. He was trying to protect his own pride. He didn't want a woman to do what he was too afraid to do. He didn't want to be shown up. Another man, one of the firefighters, came running up, coughing. "Chief, we're out of water on the east side. We can't get to it. The fire's spreading." Frank looked at him, then at the fire, then at Ellie. He was caught between his pride and the truth. His loud voice had no power here. His arrogance was a useless shield. Ellie didn't wait for his answer. She pushed past him, her shoulder brushing his. He stumbled back, his face a mix of shock and anger. But she was already moving, running towards the back of the mill, her mind focused on the mission. She didn't look back. She didn't have time. The town, the crowd, Frank's insults, they all faded away. The only thing that mattered now was the man inside. She had to save him. She had to use her strength, her courage, and her training. She had to do it, not for respect, not for a job, but because it was the right thing to do. She felt the heat of the fire on her skin as she rounded the corner of the building. She saw a small window that wasn't burning yet. It was her only way in. As she reached for it, she heard a voice, a faint shout from the crowd. It was Frank. He was yelling at her, telling her to stop. But she didn't listen. She was going in, and this time she wouldn't be stopped. The air inside the grain mill was thick with smoke, hot as a furnace. Eleanor Vance's lungs burned with every breath. She had broken the glass of the small window with a rock and scrambled inside, the sound of the shattering glass swallowed by the roar of the fire. She was back in the chaos, back in the danger, and a strange sense of calm settled over her. This was a world she knew, a world she had survived before. She dropped to the floor, her body low to the ground, searching for cleaner air. She could hear the crackle of the fire, the groan of the old wood beams, the hiss of steam as water hit the hot surfaces. She was a ghost in this place, a shadow moving through the darkness. She was alone, but she was not afraid. She had a mission. She crawled forward, her hand pressed against the floor, feeling her way through the smoke. She could hear the faint sound of a cough, a human sound coming from somewhere ahead. She moved towards it, her senses on high alert. Her heart pounded in her chest, a steady rhythm that spoke of purpose. She found him in a small office at the back of the mill. The young man was huddled in a corner, his face and hands black with soot. He was shaking, a silent sob escaping his lips. He was alive, but he was trapped. The door to the office was blocked by a pile of fallen debris, a wall of wood and broken plaster that had been knocked over by a small explosion. Ellie crawled to him. "Hey," she said, her voice a low whisper. "You're going to be okay. We're going to get you out of here." He looked up at her, his eyes wide with surprise and fear. He didn't recognize her at first. He just saw a face in the smoke, a light in the darkness. She looked at the debris blocking the door. It was too heavy to move. She couldn't pull him out. She needed to get to the other side. She needed to make a new path. "Stay here," she whispered. "Don't move. I'll be right back." She moved away from the office, her mind already working. She knew this building. She had worked here as a teenager doing a summer job. She remembered the layout of the back rooms. She remembered a back door. It was old and probably locked, but it was their only way out. As she moved through the smoke-filled corridor, her hands brushing against the dusty walls, she heard the sirens outside getting louder. The fire was growing, the flames licking at the old wood. She had to be fast. She had to be smart. She found the door, its old paint chipped and faded. The lock was an old steel padlock rusted shut. She pulled on it, but it wouldn't budge. She hit it with her fist, but it was solid. She was trapped. They were both trapped. A memory, a quiet, simple one, came to her. It was a memory of her father. He was a farmer, a man who believed in hard work and simple tools. He had taught her how to fix things, how to make things work. He had taught her to trust in the tools she had. And the only tool she had now was a small wrench she had in her pocket, a tool from her work at the diner. It wasn't a gun. It wasn't a .45, but it was a tool, and she had to use it. She hit the padlock with the wrench, the small, sharp sound swallowed by the roar of the fire. She hit it again and again, the steel ringing. It was a desperate sound, a desperate act. But she kept hitting it, her arm a blur of motion. She wasn't a hero. She was just a woman with a wrench trying to save a life. And then she heard it, a faint click. The old lock, rusted and tired, had given up. She pulled on the door and it creaked open, a small square of light in the dark. She was out. She was safe, but she couldn't leave. The young man was still inside. She had to go back. She ran back to the office. The smoke was thicker now, the heat more intense. She could hear the groan of the ceiling above her, and she knew she didn't have much time. She pulled on the debris blocking the door, her hands bleeding and raw. She pulled and pulled, her muscles burning. She was stronger than she looked. She was stronger than they thought. Finally, a piece of wood gave way. She squeezed through the small opening, her body aching, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She reached for the young man, pulling him out of the corner. "Come on," she yelled. "We have to go." He was still shaking, but he followed her, a silent shadow. They ran, low to the ground, back to the open door. The light was like a beacon, a promise of life. As they got closer, she heard a new sound, a different sound. The sound of a single gunshot. It was loud and clear, not like the crack of a rifle, but the deep, powerful sound of a handgun. A .45. She stopped. Her mind, so focused on the mission, was confused. She looked at the young man, and then she looked at the door. Who was outside? And why were they shooting? She pushed him through the door first, his body collapsing outside. She followed him, her body a raw mess of cuts and bruises. She fell to the ground, gasping for air, her lungs on fire. She looked up and saw him. Frank. He was standing there, his face pale, his hands shaking. And in his hand he was holding a gun, an M1911A1 .45. He looked at her, then at the young man she had saved. He looked at the smoking barrel of his gun, then back at her. He said nothing. The loud, proud man was silent. He had a .45, and he had used it, but he hadn't used it to save anyone. He had used it to shoot the padlock on the door, a last desperate attempt to show his courage, to be a hero, but it was too late. He had waited too long. He had hesitated. He had failed. And she had done his job for him. The whole town was watching. The firefighters, the police, the crowd of people. They saw her, bruised and dirty, the hero she was. They saw him, a man with a gun in his hand, a look of shame on his face. The loud talker was silent. The woman they had underestimated was the one who had saved the day. The aftermath of the fire was a quiet storm. The fire was put out, the young man was taken to the hospital with smoke inhalation, and the town was left in a daze. The cameras from the local news station showed up, and the story was told. Not Frank's story, but Eleanor Vance's. The woman who had been mocked and dismissed was the one who had saved a life. Frank stood on the sidelines, the M1911A1 still in his hand, a symbol of his failure. The gun that was supposed to be his badge of courage was now a mark of his shame. He was silent, his face a mask of defeat. The loud, proud man was gone, replaced by a ghost of a person. Ellie, exhausted but full of a quiet satisfaction, was surrounded by people. The sheriff, a tired old man with a kind face, came up to her. "Ellie," he said, his voice soft. I'm sorry. We should have hired you." He didn't just say it to her. He said it to the cameras. He said it to the town. He was making things right. She looked at him and smiled. "It's okay, Sheriff. I'll just put in a new application." He nodded, a look of respect in his eyes. He had seen her in action. He had seen her courage. He had seen that a soldier was a soldier, no matter what they wore. As the crowd began to thin, Ellie saw Frank still standing there, his head down. The gun was still in his hand, but he was holding it loosely, like it was a weight he couldn't carry. She walked over to him, her step slow and steady. He looked up, his eyes meeting hers. He didn't say anything. There was nothing he could say. His loud voice had been replaced by a deep silence. "Frank," she said, her voice soft. "Why?" He flinched at the question. He looked at the gun in his hand, then at her. He sighed, a long, tired sound that seemed to come from the very depths of his soul. "That day," he said, his voice a low whisper, "you came back. You came back with that look in your eyes, the look of a person who had seen things, the look of a person who had survived." He stopped, a tear rolling down his cheek, cutting a path through the soot on his face. He was broken. The loud, proud man was gone forever. "We were in France," he said, his voice barely a sound. "A small town, not much different from this one. We were in a firefight. I was with my best friend Jimmy. We were pinned down. He was a medic like you. He needed me to cover him, to give him a second so he could get to a wounded soldier. But I froze. I was scared. The gun in my hand felt like a toy. It felt useless. He looked at the M1911A1, his face a mix of pain and shame. I froze. I was a coward. I didn't fire. Jimmy, he didn't make it. The Germans got him. I got back to the base and they gave me a medal for bravery. They said I fought bravely, but I didn't. I ran, and I told them I was a hero, and I've been living that lie ever since." He looked at her, his eyes full of a deep, sad understanding. "When you came back, you with your quiet courage, you reminded me of him. You reminded me of what I should have been. You with your gun, with your truth. I couldn't stand it. I had to tear you down. I had to pretend you were nothing because if you were something, then it meant I was nothing." The truth, so simple and so painful, hung in the air between them. His mockery, his insults, his cruelty. It wasn't about her. It was about him. It was about his own failure. He had been so scared of the past that he had tried to erase her future. Ellie looked at him, not with anger, but with a deep sadness. She reached out and took the M1911A1 from his hand. It was cold and heavy, a familiar comfort. It was the same gun she had carried, the same gun that had saved her life. It was a tool of courage, and she had used it. He had tried to use it as a symbol of his false courage, and it had failed him. She looked at him, a man broken by his own lies, and she saw not an enemy, but another victim of a long-ago war. She didn't want revenge. She just wanted the truth, and now she had it. The truth had set her free, and maybe, just maybe, it would set him free too. The twist wasn't revenge. It wasn't about her getting back at him. It was about the exposure of truth, the quiet, powerful truth that lived inside her, and the ugly, painful truth that lived inside him. The story wasn't about a woman proving she was better than a man. It was about a soldier, a true soldier, showing a man what courage really was. Ellie turned and walked away, the gun in her hand, a symbol of her journey. She didn't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. She knew who she was. She was Eleanor Vance, a soldier, a survivor, a woman who carried a .45 and a heart of steel. The title of the story wasn't just about two guns. It was about two kinds of courage, one that was loud and fake, and one that was quiet and true, one that fell short, and one that proved unstoppable.